And our recording has begun. Again, just to remind everybody now that it's officially recording that we are recording this evening's meeting to be put later and shared out with parents on our website as well as via our community outreach message. So we shared out the agenda this evening with you. But before we start, I like to start every meeting, and many of you are family engagement meeting pros. Just a reminder, the reason this exists is because we show up together because we care, because we believe that we can all bring ideas, suggestions, and our own experiences and feedback to the table in hopes that, we can work together and make things better. And again, since we began these last year, it's been a source of pride for me. I was half joking with Mr. Pyne earlier. Like, I absolutely love these meetings. And I think every time somebody hears me say something very enthusiastically, they think I'm sarcastic, but I'm never sarcastic. I absolutely love these meetings. Tonight's, again, agenda is short, but we're going to be focusing on two big topics. Number one is school-wide positive behavior. One, because I think it's always good, as a staff to review it every year, as well as for parents, so you understand what it is. But also, particularly this year, we've had a number of offerings to, present to families about how to sort of establish great environments at home for learning. And maybe we can share what we do at school, because as I've said a number of times, what we do as educators sometimes seems like magic. Where you've got, 15, 20 kids in a general year, sometimes 25, up close to 30 kids in a classroom. And, when you come home with your own, 1, 2, 3 children or whatever it is, and it seems like, wow, it's so hard. How do those teachers do it? Well, we're going to share some of what we do in a little more depth tonight and hopefully engage you in some of that. And also just to hear your perspective and your feedback regarding our live streaming, which is basically a little over a week old. So, and I look forward to hearing that from you. So without further ado, I'm going to begin just by giving a very brief overview of what are, and I'm never sure I'm saying it correctly. When I say it, I feel like it's ginger ale, like it's Schweppes, but I believe it's Schweppes, although Jeremy, our consultant, says like Swibs, something like that. But it's our school-wide positive behavior support program. You hear a lot about us, about this from us regarding both the framework for it, regarding both our school-wide positive behavior as well as our MTSS program, our multi-tiered system of support. And so here's the premise. And I think once you hear it, and I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things we do as educators is teach everybody in the entire school what we expect of them regarding behavior, right? So part of what we do for that is, number one, we create what we call our guiding principles. You've probably heard your teachers talk to the students about being responsible, respectful, safe, and proud. Smile and give me a nod if you've heard that before. Okay, so those are elementary school wide, K through 6, the principles that we have established about expectations. So once we define those for the students, the next step is to basically teach them what that means, right? And when we talk about that, a teacher establishing a classroom culture is one thing, and they certainly use those principles to support it. But we also focus on places where there aren't teachers. How do you be responsible, respectful, safe, and proud in the hallways, in the bathrooms, in the cafeteria, on the buses, etc.? Because those are always times where there's not necessarily a teacher or a staff member, in a bathroom with them or on a bus sitting next to them. But the idea is we teach them the expectations for everything. And of course, as you know, as parents, students don't always listen the first time. So one of the ways in which we sort of promote that is we reinforce great behavior by rewarding it. Those of you who ever took a psychology class probably remember Pavlov's dog, and you ring a bell and give the dog a bone, and then all of a sudden you ring the bell and the dog salivates, but you don't have to give him a bone anymore. It almost feels very behaviorist, right? Like, okay, great job, we're going to give you something. But it really isn't. I think a lot of parents sometimes when they hear about this think it's bribing students, and it really isn't. The idea is, when we give a reward, it doesn't have to be a treat or a reward of something physical. It could just be, sometimes you go to your children, you go, hey, I'm really proud of you. Great job. And that just puts a smile on a kid's face for an entire day. And a lot of times, they'll come home and say, I got a sticker, but they'll also, but what they'll probably remember more than that sticker is that time where that teacher really, gave them that, the big kudos for what they did in class. So when we teach it to them, we usually have a system of basically rewarding that great behavior. We have our school store. We have our, I'm not sure what it's called in Slatington, but we've got our Bulldog Bucks and our Peter's Pups, our Peter's Paws, and things like that. On top of basically turning that reward into something tangible, an eraser, a pencil, an experience. Last year, a couple students bought lunch with the principal, which doesn't quite happen this year, but is certainly a fun one. But we also have a monthly reward. Oftentimes you've had kids come in with, they're doing their dance party today, or they're doing their, special dress up day. You've probably all been, experiencing those. Now, throughout the year, this is the part that the parents really don't see, but throughout the year, as educators, what our job is for the tier one, for teaching everybody, is we continually examine data and assess those needs. And we've actually got two examples for you. Last year at Peters, one of the things we found going halfway through the year was that, wow, bus referrals are very, very high. Whether it's students acting out on a bus when there's nobody over their shoulder watching them, there's no teacher there, or also, during our dismissal for buses where teachers had done a number of write-ups because they weren't following those expectations. So what we do is we look at that data and then we address that need. So for example, if you remember, we began a Bus of the Month program last year. That was designed specifically to address some of the issues that were going on. And in the short time we did that, bus behavior improved. Did it improve overnight? No, it didn't improve overnight. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But we certainly saw tangible, recordable and, data-proven, impacts from that. And I know Mr. Pyne had a Slatington example he wanted to share about how you address needs based on the data we look at.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I think one of the things that Mr. Schnyderite said that's really important is the overnight thing. All of these things take time. They take trial and error. We've had one that was a silver bullet, and it was recess referrals. We took football off of the playing field. Recess referrals dropped dramatically. Let them do anything. Football, for some reason, kids will just punch each other over football. The more developed one, actually, and the one I wanted to share, was the cafeteria. Now, Slatington, when they did the renovation for the cafeteria was built with fairly challenging acoustics. It gets very, very loud in there. And so we were constantly trying to figure out how to reduce volume, because we knew that referrals were high and behaviors were high, but we also knew that part of the problem was likely that the volume was such in there that it didn't contribute to a very, placid atmosphere. It contributed to an atmosphere that would allow for that. We tried all kinds of things. We tried schedules. We took the bell away. For a while, the monitors were using this loud bell in order to get kids' attention, it was cacophony. It was louder than the kids were, but it was just very sloppy sounding. We went to a microphone and we tried speaking softly into it. We ended up putting up acoustic absorbing panels in the cafeteria to try and absorb some of the sound. We finally cracked it, and it took 3 years. We finally found a way, but the data kept pointing to the fact that that was an area where kids were getting in trouble, and we recognized that there were things that we could do about it. And so I know Mr. Schnyderite went to sort of, again, like the recognition piece too, but then the other side of this too is just, it allows us, the Schweb's sort of platform, or PBIS, whatever you call it, it allows us a platform for really using data in order to try to identify problem areas in the school and then take action to try to mitigate those. And so that could be in responding to the positive, which is a lot of what we do, but sometimes it's also removing the things that end up triggering the behaviors we don't want to see as well. So I think those are two great examples. And honestly, Mr. Schnyderite, the buses, when we get back to normal, that is still a nut I had not cracked, and I am stealing your idea. We are doing a Bus of the Month until we get those bus referrals down as well.
Yeah, it just so happens we are currently in December 15th, and I've had one bus referral all year. I don't think that's we have not actually begun the Bus of the Month program because right now there's other bigger needs we're working on. But I believe, as soon as we go back to our traditional 5 days, That's certainly going to be a continued need, and we would continue to sort of hone in on that. So to sort of review again, the idea of tier one, and that's the longest one, and the one that takes the most time. We have these guiding principles: responsible, respectful, safe, and proud. We teach students what our expectations are for those, both within the classroom, but also in those sort of less oversight areas: hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria, buses. We reward great behavior. We do that through school store, monthly rewards, through experiences. We continually examine data to figure out where it's working and where it's not. And then when it's not, we sort of plan for, what could happen to address those needs further, right? Now, we said there's 3 tiers, right? So the question is, what happens when there's a student who doesn't respond to tier 1? A student who, no matter what you teach them, is still not being respectful, responsible, safe, or proud in one of the areas in the school. Well, tier 2, it's assumed that about 80% of the entire student body, typically adheres to tier 1, learns the expectations, and follows those. It's assumed that typically in any school in America, that 15% of those students probably need a little more reinforcement. So we have what happens is there's a more intensive intervention, and we use, as per our district, what's called a check-in, check-out program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. If you don't have a student within that, you might not know about it. But basically what we do is we create an environment where a student who needs some extra support and some more intensive intervention, they get that. They have an adult in the building, sometimes another teacher, sometimes a staff member. It could be a coach, it could be a cafeteria worker, somebody that the child is close with. And that person checks in with them just for a moment or two at the beginning of the day and checks out with that student at the end of the day. The idea is that they get a chance to build a relationship, and that person sets a positive example for that student, and hopefully becomes some kind of role model for them. Within the check-in, check-out program, we also have a sheet that reflects our school-wide principles: responsible, respectful, safe, and proud. And what the child does is bring that sheet to every teacher, depending on if it's a class system where, for instance, Mr. Pyne has different teachers teaching different subjects in the later grades, or if it's at a self-contained, where like it is at Peters in 3rd grade at Slatington, it might be breaking down by category: ELA, reading, special, etc. And then they basically give them a score. Were they responsible, respectful, safe, and proud? Yes, no, maybe. And all these, what the actual sheet looks like, it could be a number sheet, it could be a thumb up or a thumb down. It's something simple for the teacher to fill out, but then we can look at it. Remember, we talked about accessing data and sort of using that to guide what we do. We can now sit down and look at a child and say, oh, wow, they're having a great month, they're improving. But I noticed that every time during ELA, it's always thumbs down. Well, that tells us something as educators, and then we can take a look at it and say, well, what is that? Oh, well, ELA is always after lunch. So the child comes, eats food, gets all riled up, and then comes back to class and doesn't do a great job. So that might be something as simple as noticing that through the data and then talking to the teacher and say, hey, before you start, it might be a good idea before ELA just to set those expectations again so that child knows. So that data really tells us a lot. And then we talked about tier 3. Tier 3, it's assumed that in any school, you might have a student who does not adhere to tier 1, which teaches everybody, or you may be given this check-in, check-out sheet and they don't respond. What then do you do? So rather than at this point, and it's different at every school, but at Peters, for instance, instead of doing a check-in, check-out sheet that's related to just responsible, respectful, safe, and proud, we now get individual. We know this child, we know where they're struggling, and we can create sort of a check-in, check-out sheet that's related to a specific behavior we're looking to improve. Again, working with the parent, looking with the teacher as a team, and basically creating that. Now, the reason I bring all this up to you is what I'm about to do is turn this over to Mr. Pyne, because we're going to next take a look at in a moment what this system and what this program can sort of benefit from you, and also ways in which we can sort of engage you in, perhaps being more a part of it. One of the things in our trainings, Mr. Pyne and I have noticed, is that, we can always involve parents more. And certainly, I think that relationship is beneficial. Before I pass it over to Mr. Pyne, just to make the entire team aware, both Mr. Pyne and I have set ourselves sort of a goal for this year. We're very proud that over the past few years, both Slatington and Peters have been rated as a tier one fidelity. Basically, there's an organization with the IU that comes in and assesses us each year, and looks at what we do, looks at our principles, looks at how we sort of push those out to the students, how we reteach things, sort of the programs we have in place. And both of our schools have been tier one fidelity and have been, what was it called, Mr. Pyne? It's continued tier one fidelity. So not only do we make that, but over a certain amount of years, we have kept doing a great job. So both of our goals, on top of continuing to support students and teaching everybody, is looking at what we're doing for our tier two students. We've been using the check-in, check-out program for, I believe, more than 2 years now as a district. And for the year plus I've been at Peters, it's been a program we've used. So now we're working, and we both Mr. Pyne and I did a training last week, and how we can really support that 15% in hopes of so providing some better supports, how we can look at that data differently, bring it back to the staff, and sort of help everybody, because the goal of this is that everybody eventually wants to work into tier one, where we do not have to have any oversight with those students anymore. And that's where we're going to bring sort of the connection between what we're doing now in the remote environment and sort of bring you as part of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pyne. Thank you, Mr. Pyne.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Schnyderite. So, yeah, I mean, and I want to talk about this in the context of, so we're looking at tier two and tier three, and obviously that moves into the very individual for students when we're working with large populations. A lot of times at home, you're working with a child or a few children and things like that, but we all recognize that different children have different needs. And so right now, I mean, I think what we're realizing is, and, I was happy because Jeremy at the IU said it, and I hadn't heard it said before. One, at the core of positive behavior interventions and support, or SWEBs, or whatever you call it, it's got a couple of different names. One is the use of data. Now, your data is probably a little bit easier to collect than ours because we're collecting it across a lot of time and space and a lot of people. Your data is probably pretty intuitive, right? I'm noticing that Johnny is doing this. I'm sorry, I always pick on Johnny. It's not his fault. I noticed this, you know what I mean? And you're noticing things that you want to see change. And, the other real core tenet of positive behavior support is the positive piece. That ultimately we recognize that positive reinforcement of what we want to see, and recognizing that, which is not always easy for us. It doesn't come naturally. We naturally respond to the incident, right? The event. We don't naturally respond to what we expect, right? Like we naturally seem to just let that flow in the river of our life. But the reality is that it's the discipline of taking that out. And the thing that I was really happy to hear him talk about, which I think goes to the key of maybe why there was a light bulb that went off as we were talking about this for me and Mr. Schnyderite, was that relationships really are a huge key piece of this. And as we move into tiers 2 and 3, what we're really doing is we're taking that pre-teaching, right, of the behaviors and the expectations and the reinforcement of it, and we're taking it from this sort of broad classroom or the hallways or the classroom, and we're putting it where the student has a relationship with someone who is actually discussing that with them, who's actually building those connections about what it means to be proud. And, how did you feel when you made that responsible decision and things like that, and really trying to build a positive experience around them, recapping those. And, boy, what a missed opportunity all these years that we haven't done more to engage parents in participating in that, because the relationship, there's nothing that I can do that can ever, kind of match that relationship, that connection, that influence. And so really there's two things that we kind of wanted to open up discussion on and just get some input, because we'd like to take action on it. And one is, strategies that you think would be well received in terms of how to engage families and the home and parents in, building that connection, the connection between, even maybe using common language like safe, proud, respectful, and responsible. I mean, when I see a kid who's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, I ask them, like, was that a safe thing to do? And, so they all start to sort of internalize this set of, these are the core concepts by which we define ourselves, here. And, you know, we're not trying to infiltrate, but like at the same time within the home, like that bridge could be a real strength. You know, it could be a real strength when they hear some of those common things, not only across classrooms, but across environments. So that's really one of the things that we're just kind of looking for some feedback on. And the other thing that came up that we realized that we kind of been lacking is real parental and, you know, yes, some student, but definitely not enough parental involvement in how to shape out these structures, you know, and particularly when it comes to incentives, when it comes to, you know, figuring out what it is that different, you know, kids and, you know, maybe we do this at tier 2 and 3. What is it that really motivates them? What is it that when they, you know, they get this, when they hear this word, you know, when these things happen, you know, is really going to hopefully change the behavior, you know, and get them on the right track. And this even extends down to the school store. And, you know, I mean, Jeremy had brought up something that the fellow from the IU had brought up something that I guess neither of us had really thought about, that, you know, a lot of their schools that have the most successful school stores and they're most successfully run are really tapping into and engaging parents in that, and engaging parents in, you know, possibly participating, or even just reaching out and saying, hey, I mean, you live with all of our students, you know, what do you think we can do in shaping that experience for them? So I don't want to say like we have to start with one or the other, but I guess might as well start with the former rather than the latter. I mean, in terms of us engaging parents and, you know, kind of engaging, I guess, that cross dialogue about, you know, the home environment and the school environment, and getting common language and kind of, you know, better informing them and making them a part of that. I mean, does anyone have any thoughts, any ideas or ways that you think we could tap into that better?
And I'd love to share the reason this started out really quickly was I think the PTO is really creative. And I know there's a number of PTO. You know, you had the idea. One of the things we're struggling with is we typically give, you know, students Peter's Paws and Bulldog Bucks, and then they turn them in to put their hand into the box of toys and pick one out. We can't do any of that this year. And then I see the PTO like, hey, we're going to sponsor a virtual, you know, quiz night, and we're going to have family. I'm like, wow, that's really creative. So the idea is, you know, you come up with some creative ideas from your perspective, ways in which we can help reward the students, but do it in a responsible way with what we're looking at as part of our safety plan.
So I will say, and I don't know that this is necessarily something that is directly seen as a reward, but I have one of my 3 children tends to be a huge limit tester. And so when he started school, we expected that there might occasionally be an issue. Because once he knows what the limits and boundaries are, he is fantastic. But until he knows what they are, he's going to do whatever he needs to do to find them. But we had an issue with him in kindergarten, and it was the most bizarre thing that I think I have ever experienced as a parent. He came home from school looking very sad and dejected, and I asked him what had happened, why he was so upset. I don't really want to tell you. So we talked about it some more, and it turns out that he had to sit on the bench for 5 minutes at recess because he stepped on Mr. Ross's new shoes. This was the year that Mr. Ross was teaching kindergarten. And I kind of looked at him completely baffled and was like, what on earth are you talking about? You stepped on Mr. Ross's new shoes, like on purpose? And he hung his head and said, yes. And now I'm standing here as a parent, like I can't even wrap my brain around why on earth my child would do this. So we had an entire conversation about why on earth did you step on Mr. Ross's new shoes? Like, he's not even your teacher. Like, how did this even happen? Apparently, he just got it in his head that these were beautiful new shoes, and he just walked up and stepped on them. So I asked him to please just, like, go away for a few moments so I could process, like, what I was even going to do with this, because this is not in the parenting handbook. Like... this is not something I was prepared to deal with. But we sat down and I told him, I said, I understand that you got a consequence at school for the act of stepping on somebody's shoes. But I said, in our house, it goes deeper. And that is, you disrespected a teacher and a member of authority, a person of authority. And this is what your father and I are not okay with. So we actually had him write a letter of apology to Mr. Ross. And he took this into school. Mrs. Hedges was his teacher at the time. And I didn't realize how hard it is to make a kindergartner write one sentence, like, I'm sorry I stepped on your shoes, took forever. Because they don't write so well at that age. But Mrs. Hedges called me and told me that she was absolutely shocked and impressed that we would do this. And in her 16 years of teaching at the time, she had never had a parent ask a child to apologize. And I was blown away by this because, I mean, yes, it was kind of not a positive consequence, but our goal is to teach our kids to take responsibility for their actions and to show them how their actions affect other people. So when you mess up, whether it was an intentional mess up or not, you apologize for it. And you move on from that point. And so it seems like in general society, I guess, because I mean, after 16 years, nobody had had their child apologize for their actions, that this is kind of something, I guess, I didn't realize that people weren't apologizing for stuff anymore. Like, I didn't realize that this had happened. But it shocked me that she was so surprised that we would ask our child to apologize for something. So I wonder if maybe and honestly, after this, we had no more behavioral issues because now he understood that, like, A, everybody was on the same page, and B, he was going to be required to take responsibility for his actions. So I wonder if there's not maybe more of a need for kids to see their role in what their actions do. Like, you did something, and you need to tell this person that you are sorry that you did it because you affected them. And it's not so much about the shoes, it's about the person's feelings and the other human being.
Hey, Katya, that's a great example, I think, of, for example, Mrs. Hedges. You would think that typically as a parent, somebody does something bad and we're going to punish you, right? So if you see what she did, obviously there was a consequence there, but rather than focusing on the punishment, it was highlighting, sort of calling home and saying, almost like she was, for the family saying, hey, great job. Thank you for doing this. Right. So here's something that just jumped out at me and how to take that and put it into the Schweb's sort of mindset. We typically have, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but we have a monthly reward at Peters where we write cards to, and I'll be honest with you, if you pay me $1 million, I could guess, but I wouldn't get it right. It's maybe to, some retirement homes or it's to veterans homes, but, to basically, give the kids a chance to reach out and, be positive to others. So maybe something we can even look at doing internally is saying maybe one of our monthly rewards could be, hey, pick 5 people and you're going to get some time at the end of the month and you're going to write them a note, and write the teacher's name on it. And then, sort of at the end of the week, we can distribute those. And all of a sudden they're reading notes from their classmates and their friends. And all of a sudden everybody gets something and, sort of spread the positivity. So I love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to chime in really quick too. I think that was positive, right? I mean, and that's why I was really happy when we talked this past week at the training about relationships, because the reality is what you did is it restored a relationship, right? I mean, like it took away the weirdness that happens when one person does something against another person. That's a positive experience. I also want to point out that what you said, and this is what happens after you start thinking in terms of responsible, respectful, safe, and proud, that you use both the words responsible and respect in that story, right? I mean, and again, that's what we try to do a lot is, really kind of hone in on, these are our values, right? And, I mean, that really does cause the students to not look at their behaviors as isolated incidents, but as, part of, these are the building blocks of me, right? And so I just wanted to point that out because they stood out for me as 2 words you threw out there.
Mr. Schnyderite.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. I had a question, and I was just kind of brainstorming here with the idea of having students pick people to praise. What if we did almost like a secret Santa and paired each child up with another one secretly. And once a month, everybody wrote an anonymous nice note to each other, noticing how, I liked if it was just an outfit, or try to keep it grade level so that when they're seeing each other at recess or at lunch, they can say, I saw you being kind to so and so. Now, sorry, I got a phone call in the middle of that. My child is very good at policing the negative actions of other children, and he struggles with that, and he has all 3 years of school. So I could see it benefiting him personally, instead of looking at all the things that you see other kids breaking the rules on, because they didn't raise their hand or they're out of their seat. If he has a specific child or children even that he'd be like, hey, I saw you being good, it might turn it's something he does naturally anyway. So instead of having him look for negative things, have him look for positive things. And it might be kind of fun, like at the end of the year, be like, oh, this is who your secret person was, and everybody, you don't pair them up together, but you have, somebody different for each child so that they know that there's other kids too that notice their good behavior.
Sure.
Just a brainstorm.
That's great, Rebecca. And just to sort of put that to the Schweb's context, we can have an entire month and call it Positivity Month, and then sort of urge the kids and remind them every day. And this would basically what the educators do. We come up with these ideas. The Schweb's team sort of selects ideas, and then we plan it out and run with it. That could be something as simple as, hey, every day, we'll ask the teachers to start off with one positive comment to a different student each day, and then just encourage students throughout the month to every day say something nice about at least one person. And all of a sudden you see kids walking around the hallways going, you look beautiful today. I love your hair. Oh my goodness, and then instead of seeing them running around doing silly things, and again, that's almost like just sort of guiding the mindset, right? The focus of positivity rather than punishing bad behavior. Let's get everybody to be positive. I love that idea. Thank you.
I actually I had a question actually about the assessment that one of you two mentioned about the IU that comes in. Is there, how is that run? Or is that like, why is the IU involved? And does that affect funding or any kind of grants or anything like that? Like, what is the purpose of the IU doing an assessment? For
well, Mr. Pyne probably has a better context for the scope of why. I can tell you the assessment is pretty intense.
Okay.
That we have to submit, lots and lots of evidence. They're looking for us, again, sort of how we establish principles, what we do as far as, supporting, and this is, again, just for the Tier 1 assessment, what we do to support students, how well we as a school have sort of bought into it. So they actually, and last year they actually came into the building, they walk around, they interview teachers, they interview random students, and just randomly walk around the hallways and say, hey, do you know what the 4 principles of, respond? And they go, oh, respond, and they sort of see if everybody's involved, because obviously if it's just a principal saying, oh, we're doing great. So they actually walk around and sort of shadow and see what things are like throughout the day. To make that something where, they have a chance to, outside of us just telling them how we are, they get a chance to see it for themselves.
Okay.
I don't believe it's related to any funding. I know that, we don't get anything special other than to say that we are Tier 1. We have Tier 1 fidelity for our school-wide positive behavior. I think it adds to the source of pride. I think it's something that it's important to share with parents that we do this very, very well. And again, both Mr. Pyne and I are hoping to in the future go for Tier 2 fidelity as well. Mr. Pyne, anything to add? I'm not sure why the IU. It's not literally an IU program, but we've got consultants and they've got many programs that they run. Many of our in-service presentations run through the IU. So it's my guess that it's that, but Mr. Pyne probably has a better answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, that really is it. So the IU, I mean, really serves as another eye on the program. And they work as a conduit for a whole number of things that come down from the state. So because this is sort of a state initiative as well, they've just developed experts who are able to come out and kind of run through all of that with us. And yeah, there's really two ways they do it. I mean, one is that really intensive assessment. The other thing they do on years they don't do that is what's called a benchmark of quality, and they sit down with the Schweb's team and they'll ask a series of questions. And a lot of it relies on us answering honestly, but we do. And some years we do better than others because really in evaluating in different areas, we're just not doing very well in this area. And that's good for us because, again, that's data that helps us sort of guide decisions and planning for the subsequent year. I actually was joking with Mr. Schnyderite that until this year, the tier 2 fidelity piece, we've been doing so many of these things. I just really was inspired and motivated by the training last week to kind of say, hey, I really think we should organize and structure all this and get that, extra eye in here and get the recognition and things like that. And so your question kind of is a question that I probably arrogantly asked myself for years, was like, well, why do I have to bother with that? But I really love working with Jeremy, and I really love to have him come in and take a closer look at what we're doing. And I think we will. I think we'll get that recognition.
So does the school district pay into this program in the same way that we pay the IU for special education?
I can answer that. This is Dr. Stoker. I can answer some of that as well. So we pay a certain amount of money into the IU as a school district, and there are many programs and services that are part of that package. So it's part of our general monies that we pay into the IU that help facilitate that. And just to add to what Mr. Schnyderite and Mr. Pyne said, we look to have the IU come in and assess because it's another neutral party that can come in. So it's not our school district or our school buildings or our employees assessing ourselves. It's a neutral party that can come in and kind of take a different look at things. And in order to get some of the school-wide positive behavior support services, each IU has somebody that kind of runs that department or that program. And in order to keep that fidelity not just in our building or district, but at the IU level and then even up to the state level, they have people that have been trained to kind of look at fidelity across a broader spectrum. So that's why we have somebody come in from the IU to help us. But it does not impact any grants or anything that we have. There are grants out there that we can write for some of the school-wide positive behavior support things that we do. But it doesn't take any money away from us. It's just the money that we typically pay to the IU.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stoker.
You're welcome. And I apologize. I just got home, so I don't want to put, everything up there on the video yet. Sure.
So I'm looking at the clock. It's 6:12 by my clock here. Here's my suggestion. This is such an important topic, and Mr. Pyne and I can probably spend the next 4 hours sitting here brainstorming with you. But what we might want to do, if anybody's really interested in this, I would love to have sort of like a parent or a few parent liaisons that, maybe you can meet with maybe Mr. Pyne and I just at a convenient time for you and just sort of, again, get some ideas from you. It could be, we could try to back it up to a PTO meeting. So for those of you who attend that, we can try to maybe just get together half an hour or something before that or half an hour after that. Again, one of our goals is to involve parents more. And already we've got two great ideas, some great conversation here. Again, and we would like to give enough time for this, talk about live streaming, because we would love to hear, certainly with what we're doing over the last week or so, sort of your experiences with it so far. But is there anybody that'd be willing to, or interested in, hey, let's get together another time and let's talk a little more in depth about school-wide positive behavior and how we can work together for that?